This is 2000. And we started talking about
Yeah. I'm looking for someone to well, it's a new one, so it's hold on. That would be great, but I want to hear what the word Orthodox is about. You have to agree. I think they got some food for us. 25 samples. Yeah. Like maybe a few more samples. That's a big. All I have to do is a restriction. The issue is that I submitted these for acid ones. It's sweet. On these things, so that's why it's like drop it off and get some restrictions. But you see,
it's not official.
so that's the ability to make sugar pizza. Yeah, the samples are covered.
No worries.
No.
Sorry to be in front of you.
That's okay. I can't even live near Jerry's. Like everything.
Yeah, that's how my wife is celiac. It's mostly being finished up when my kids come back and visit, and it was over Christmas time.
You have to be
Yeah, that area as well.
Yes.
So, you have a new restaurant in California that you're excited about? You can go to?
I don't eat out very much.
Straight line between Highland Valley one of these
But when I find someone who can share some information on that, I'm always just.
Yeah. I love the thing. I love
To the great one.
Yeah.
And the thing is, by the time we
We can hear you first. That's good. Yeah, radio voice. You're good.
Oh, for your lovely self. Well done.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Wouldn't mind, we're a little quarter after 12 at this time if you haven't picked up lunch. Certainly available at the back. And with that, just a watch time. About half hour, 45 minutes for Bob to provide his presentation. I know you would have seen the overview on via LinkedIn and or email, so I will not take away from this gentleman's story, so I'll turn it over to Bob, and please welcome him first. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out, folks. You'll probably get me coughing. I assure you it is not COVID, it is a heart condition, but they have identical symptoms.
Yeah.
Bugs everybody as you get older. And also, I'm just talking about the amount of money and data available for free on the internet. Every time I go in there, there's more stuff appears. So that's essentially what I'm talking about. and what you can do with it, and what companies have successfully done with it and generated had millions, we're talking millions of dollars, maybe billions generated from the system. And just to start it off, Les Beck, who died a few weeks ago, I think a couple of weeks, I've got to thank him because of him, I'm here. He was the guy who hired me to Canada, and Tom Sybil, and a whole bunch of other people who were involved in this. And he also got this database going in Saskatchewan. And I think Saskatchewan is the sort of prototype of how to handle data. I haven't found anything that even resembles how good Saskatchewan's database is. So with that, let's get going. Now that's a plane. Do any of you remember this plane? The Trilander? Dane does. It's Tony Barringer. Who remembers Tony Barringer? Oh, some of them. Absolute brilliant guy. He invented a system called input, which is very simple. It had to be on a plane. It had a boom up here, and it had a big ring around it of a cable that sent out a pulse, electric pulse, and it was picked up by a sort of thing hanging behind the plane here. And it was actually designed to find the Viet Cong gun emplacements in Vietnam, and the CIA funded it. And Tony always had trouble selling stuff because he was associated with the CIA. He ended up in Denver, Colorado, because that's where he felt more at home. But that said, why was it the Trilander? This is an Irish-built plane. It's got 3 engines, right? When you've got 3 engines and you're flying low and slow, and you lose one engine, you don't crash. You can still keep moving. And it was everybody's paranoia with the plane, that you're flying low and slow. I think they did about 150 kilometers an hour, and 100 meters or lower. They were low down. And they were always worried of losing an engine. And they also needed an engine to generate enough electrical power for the EM, the unit to make the pulses. So I think they basically used that 3rd engine on the tail as a sort of a spare engine to generate the electricity. And they also had a spare engine, because this plane would fly okay on 2 engines, and it didn't really matter which ones. Anyway, this plane flew, and ones like it, all over the world. I've never seen a record of just how many places this flew. It flew basically all of Canada, a whole bunch of the US. Did it go to Mexico, Dave? Do you know?
I don't know for sure.
I don't know about it. But what happened, I know it did Australia, South Africa, all sorts of places. But there was a plane crash in Brazil in about 1985, and the whole system was grounded. It was too dangerous to fly. And basically that was the end of the system. Tony Barringer, at that point, he died a few years later. But the data from this, with the input data, that's what I'm talking about. Now, when this plane was flying, people were getting to know in Saskatchewan the size of the target that they had to find to be able to successfully drill a mine. And it's not very big. This is the Sioux pit. And as a there, that little bit there, that's a high-grade uranium ore body. It's not very big, is it? If you drilled here, I think you'd miss it. I think if you drilled there, you'd miss it. If you drilled there, figured that pit produced $100 million, $200 million worth of uranium. I mean, this is about the world's most valuable stuff. The only stuff equal to this is gold running 1 ounce per ton. 1 ounce, not a tenth of an ounce. It's 1 ounce. So that's the target. And never forget what your target is. Now, it took a while to figure out in Saskatchewan, which is where this stuff was really first demonstrated, the value of it. But it all happened sort of from early 70s to when the planes crashed in the 80s. And this, as far as I can see from the government system, is where these input surveys are. They're all around the edge of the Athabasca Basin, all through here. And you can get them all for free now on the Government of Saskatchewan's database. Now this stuff, when I was a young whippersnapper, this was gold. There was confidential stamped on it. Nobody ever saw anybody else's input system. And they're all claiming they had the best system. And if I'd have been talking to the MEG in the late 70s, 80s, everybody would have been guarding their input system, not letting anybody see it. And now it's all available for free. It's absolutely amazing. But it's not it's a bit of an ugly system. This is really the first input survey flown in Saskatchewan. Do you remember Uranix, that company? It had I think it had a Calgary office, didn't it? It had a Saskatoon office. And the Uranix geologists and people used to come along to our MEG meetings. And it's sort of interesting that I've been around for years. I mapped for the government this area here, went down, right down like that. You know, that was the reconnaissance mapping system. Les Beck pioneered this. Did a fantastic job on this. Now, a guy called Jerry Ray, who you may remember, he was an MEG meeting member as well, showed up all regularly. He had a map area that included this bit. And I think it happened about 1975. And that's when the Iranians thought they had boulders and stuff here. And they were starting to drill it. Because they thought they had really good stuff. But they didn't really know where to drill. They just, you know, when you find boulders, what do? You've got to drill. Drilling's expensive. And Jerry talked them into flying an input survey, which was this one here. And I think it was Klaus Thiel who was the sort of exploration manager, I guess you'd call him. I know he had a hell of a time selling us to Germany to fund it. What do you want to conduct this for uranium? You're crazy, man. Well, he got it flown. And that's the survey. It's a horrible looking thing. I'm going to zoom into it. This is the best that the Saskatchewan government has right now. And I've zoomed in. They are the two pits, which was the Dealman and the Gartner. This is high-grade uranium. This is good stuff. This is worth billions. It kicked you Saskatchewan from a sort of a place over here that nobody wanted to have any interest in, into, I think for many years, it had more money spent on exploration and mining than anywhere else in Canada, probably anywhere else in North America, maybe anywhere in the world probably. But this is how the data comes in. And the flight lines, they're going this way. When the plane flew, I should just back up a bit, they didn't have GPS in these days. GPS has completely revolutionized the world. All they had was a plane with a pilot at the controls, and he had to know where he's going. So they gave them what they called a photo mosaic. So they take the air photographs, which are roughly 1 inch to the mile at the span of the imperial system, and they actually glue them together to make a mosaic with the best fit they could. And it was called a photo mosaic. That's what this background is. And the pilot would fly along. He wouldn't have a clue where he was until he saw a lake. And when he crossed the lake, he had a reference point. Remember, he's only 100 meters up in the air. He's not 1,000 meters up. He's way down just above the trees. And I don't think these lines are anywhere near as straight as they look on the mosaic. And the plane had a camera pointing straight down, which processed a strip of film. Oh, those strips of film must have been enormous. I've never seen one, but they must have been hundreds of meters long probably. And they had technicians who took the piece of film and they tried to match it to the mosaic. And then they'd match the film to the response they got from the machine. And when they saw what looked like a conductor in the ground, they put a dot on it. An input, again, Tony Barringer, he was a salesman, he wasn't a scientist. He figured that he's selling to investors, not to geophysicists. So he said, we've got to have 6 sorts of conductors. We're going to have a solid black dot, A 6-channel, no question whatsoever. 5, that's like a circle with a slice out of it. That's pretty good. You'll find that okay. 4, probably all right. 3, don't know if I want to invest in that. 2, that's just a circle with a little thing. It's probably there, but I'm not going to bet the company on it. 1 is just a circle, and a cross means we've seen a wiggle. Not sure what it means. This is what it looks like when you pull the data up on your screen, because I downloaded the data as a PDF, and of course you can't project it. PDFs are miserable things. So I then changed it to a JPEG, so I can put it into Google Earth to locate everything, and then I still couldn't see anything. So every one of these responses I'm putting a red dot on, and a red dot stands out like crazy. This is just a location point in Google Earth. Simple thing to do. And so you end up with these sort of things. Now, what do they tell you? Well, I'm very abstract at this point. One of the things that you find out is you find this at the corner of the map. I never spotted it. I don't know how many people have spotted it. Ted Ellingham. For clearer maps, see file 4074H all 0. Much better version. Ted Ellingham was the guy in Saskatchewan who used to sort this out, and he used to love putting these things on. But it's not a data item. It's just something written at the corner of the map. I think he's right. I'm still looking at that. The one I have a lot of personal interest in is this input survey, which is MacArthur River. Here's the lines going that way. I was at Texaco at this point. And Texaco, US company. The Foreign Investment Review Agency. Any of you guys ever heard of the Foreign Investment Review Agency? We're quite likely to have another one coming through with the Trudeau government. As the first Trudeau government brought this in, you had to be approved by the federal government to be able to do stuff in Canada. And uranium was about top of the list of the things they were really concerned about. So basically, Texaco had funded into this project, which was the Uranix Cameco project at that time, and had a $10 million expenditure. We had to spend it. That was the FERA deal. So we went in here, and 15% joint venture partner. This is the input survey. And we had, that's the dots, 5 dots. And they weren't very good dots. And nobody knew what to do with these dots. It was, isn't that curious? But there was some other data. I've just zoomed out here. There's the dots I was talking about. These triangles, I'm talking what you can use Google Earth for. I think you probably realize this is all just Google Earth layers. I have boulders, uranium-bearing boulders, and I mean good ones, not Mickey Mouse ones. I mean sort of thing which I've got in that pot there. They came all the way up here, and they were being found this way. Now, at that point of time, nobody really knew what an ESCA was. They'd heard about ESCAs, but ESCAs only really show up on satellite imagery. They're very hard to spot on the ground sometimes. It's just a bit higher and boulders and stuff like that. But these have obviously followed ESCA. It comes this way, and there was a few more scattered around here. We had this input anomaly up there, and some other inputs in here. Now, nobody knew what the heck to do. And I remember a joint venture meeting. We had $10 million on the table. And SNDC at that time, that was just pre-chemical, it wanted to spend the money everywhere, checking out all this stuff. They would have scattered 100-meter holes, the whole place. And I basically said, Texaco's money, I'm going to decide where to drill. Now, when you tell Cameco that, they get a bit irate. We're the boss, we're going to decide where to drill. So we cut a deal. You're going to drill 6 deep holes, and you're going to concentrate them around this area here. We called it P2 North. We sunk that conductor. And what did they do? They found MacArthur River, drilling these 6 holes. Absolutely unbelievable. And that was the beginning of MacArthur River. But you all know about MacArthur River. World's biggest concentration of uranium that's been found on the face of the earth. It's over 100,000 tons of uranium. And it's 10 to 20% grade. I mean, it's good stuff. It's not being mined right now because it's flooded with water. So they have major water problems, which they'll probably overcome. This is Canada. They have 2 problems here. One is the lease boundary, and I put it in white. I should never have put it in white. It goes right through here. And when we were drilling, we figured we were 60 meters off a lease boundary on a permit that had been defined from a 1 to 250,000 topo map, and nobody knew where the hell the border was. So I insisted on them running a legal survey right down here. So at least we knew we were inside the ground. We still don't know exactly where that legal survey is, but they all agreed that yes, legal survey was the boundary. And guess who was this side? An MEG member from a long while ago who would all remember. Murray Pike, 1X. He owned the land here, which he then sold out to a whole series of deals. Orana now owns it, the French own it. But since then, there's drilling now taking place all the way over here. So there's no drilling at all in this direction. None, zilch. The trend is defined as this way. I don't think it is. I think it goes that way. I think the thing is absolutely enormous. You know, I'm talking maybe 10 times, 20 times as big as it is right now. And I don't think it's just Bob Monday bullshit. Last time I met with the chemical geologist who I've known for years, I was talking to him about it, and he said, yes, Bob, yes. It's huge. It's not a problem with the resource. It's how we get it out the ground is a problem. So Saskatchewan is basically, right now, has got more uranium and high grade, I think, than anywhere else on the face of the earth, and they're getting more every day. It's just absolutely amazing place for uranium. It's going to supply uranium. Well, not our lifetimes, but for as long as people are around. Now, I think I'll skip that because you don't want all that detail. But where am I? There. Okay, that one. Now, where do I fit in? And where does the MEG and the membership here fit in? That's my question. This is all very nice as academic. You really want to generate money, that's what. As you get older, you realize that generating money is much more fun than doing academic stuff. This is, Cameco has drilled there, a millennium. That's what is, they continually flag that if they give up on MacArthur River and Cigar Lake, they'll probably move over to an open pit at Millennium. Same sort of numbers. Nobody knows what it is, but you're talking 100 million ton type, 100,000 tons of uranium. Uranium's worth $100,000 a ton. So when you've got 100,000 tons of it, it's worth a lot of money. There's nothing on earth worth anything like uranium. This was Canalaska. Does anybody follow Canalaska? They're on the Business Channel quite a bit. They trade at about 50 cents. They've been around for years, and they're basically run by the people who found from Iran, who basically went off and did their stuff out of Vancouver. They're very astute. Watch Canalaska. It's a really good example of really careful work. And they must spend hours looking at the databases I'm talking about. Because they spotted, this is the edge of the input survey. Nothing out here. You can see the lines sort of peter out here. And this is what Murray Pike always told me. Look at the edge of the maps, and especially the corners of maps. Because people tend to look in the middle of maps. They don't look at the edge. and the edges where there's good stuff because it's never been looked at. They spotted two sort of, I think they're 2 channel anomalies, and 3 dots. Now we're getting deep here, 400 or 500 meters. We're actually at the limit of what input could have detected. But I think these are real responses. And they state this bit and this bit about 6 months ago. And now they're claiming it's their most significant piece of land. Now, put it into economics. It's about 5,000 hectares they stake. The staking fee in Saskatchewan is 60 cents a hectare. So it costs them $3,000. 3,000, no, 3 million. $3,000 has got them this piece of land, and it may be their most significant piece of land. I'm just kicking myself. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other people kicking themselves. Why didn't I stake this piece of land? Because I haven't spotted these things. If I'd have spotted them, you'd probably have Bob Mundy's name on this, but you don't. Oh well, you learn your lessons, don't you? Look at the databases. There's another one here, and this is exactly what I'd like to do, and I sort of throw it to the membership here. Would you have the guts to do it? Azencor. Anybody heard of Azencor? It's a venture exchange company. It trades for the magnificent sum of 7 cents right now a share, and there's something like 300 million of them out there. So I think you call it the penny stock. Anyway, they have raised about $10 million to drill this target. And they have the edge of the sandstone, there it is, coming through here. They have, I've put blue in here. Blue is a magnetic load from Aeromag data. Aeromag data, by the way, is, I can't make head nor tail of it. It's really, I can give you another presentation on Aeromag data. The more closer you zoom into it, the worse it gets. You can laugh at it, but I've got data which is sort of like 1 to 10,000 scale, and it found every drummer. No question, that's what it was just noise from drumming. Anyway, they think they've got a trend here and a trend there. And they, smart of Azencor, they realize that you're not getting anywhere unless you can drive into your location. Because if you use a helicopter, all the money just goes. So they put in a road into here. I think the road is actually there right now. They're putting a proper camp in, not a Mickey Mouse camp. You have nice tents and things like that because you know you've got to have a decent camp. And they're going to spend about $5 to $10 million drilling these things. And that looks, to me, I haven't got the slider for that, but you've all heard of Patterson Lake and NextGen. Fission, I think NextGen and Fission have both presented to MEG. I know one of them has. I think they both have. And what they have found is good stuff. Again, with my talking to Cameco, they are really concerned whether it is even possible to mine uranium with underground mining. They think it's just not feasible anymore. If it doesn't flood, you've got safety, you've got everything under the sun. So they're going open pit. Well, you can open pit Patterson Lake, no problem. And then they've got a question, who is the boss? Is Cameco going to buy out NextGen Fission et al., or is Fission NextGen et al. Going to buy out Cameco mining uranium in Saskatchewan? They'll put it in the sun and do it the other way around. And I imagine they're talking about it right now, and nobody is pride at stake at this time. Fission was nearly sold out to RTZ a couple of years ago, and they couldn't, it was a huge amount, something like $500 million, but they couldn't decide on the final 10, so the whole deal fell through. So, I mean, don't get too greedy when you make these. Anyway, this is good stuff. I don't know whether I'd ever dare to do this. This is exactly what I'd like to do, but I don't know if I could sit there and trot along and try to get $10 million raised to drill this, because if it's not there, what have you got? Not much of anything. Big gamble, that's what this is all about. Now, I've just talked about uranium so far. but there's more than uranium showing up in the Athabasca Basin. And this is called West Bear. It was found, oh God, when was West Bear found? In the 70s, wasn't it? Early 80s, somewhere like that. Gulf Minerals, basically. It sits right at the edge of an input survey. So as usual, all the good stuff is right where the lines stop. It was reflown by another survey by Sintrex, and they were notorious for producing maps that nobody could decipher anything on them. So it's that. And this is owned by a sub of Cameco called UEX, which I think they spun off because Cameco is so big. If somebody finds something significant, they have a job rewarding them. So these corporations tend to spin off subs where the sort of people who are active have a means of rewarding them with shares or something like that. Because if it's a big corporation and somebody's successful and they get a bonus, everybody else gets pissed off because they haven't got their cut. A smaller thing, it's much easier to do these bonuses. Now there's the edge of the sandstone. Rabbit Lake's up there a little bit. There's a thing called West Bear right in there. The data on it is slowly coming out. And this is there it is. This is the data. That's where UEX claims that West Bear is. And look at the drill density. This is all the drilling they've done. Those drill holes are about 10 meters apart. Is that excessive? I would say it's excessive, but I'm not sure if it is. And I'm not really sure how you sit around trying to figure out where you could put those holes. But we're talking hundreds of them here. Absolutely hundreds of drill holes. Absolutely amazing they did it. And this is the official announcement by UEX. Their website, I think this is last year's. They think they've got 5.1 million pounds of cobalt. That's just in that little area, right? This isn't the whole thing. If you take the whole thing, let's just zoom back. If you take the whole thing is this. Up here. That's the whole thing. We're talking a little itty bit of it down there. It's all the same. These are the grades. It's 5.1 million pounds of cobalt. Now, cobalt is $30 a pound, I think, right now. It's valuable stuff. 5.6 million of nickel. Cobalt, nickel, Tesla batteries. That's what they need them for electric vehicles. And they've got, I'm telling you, 2 boreholes. One, 2%, 5% cobalt, almost 2% nickel over 8 meters. A similar one here at open-pittable depth. But there's an interesting comment they put on the bottom. The core is soft, friable, lost core. And they can show you zoomed in photographs. You kind of nice core samples lie on the table. They don't exist. I've seen this stuff. It's all crumbly. When it comes out the core barrel, you think, where is it? It's gone. I have no idea how they core it. Has anybody ever cored stuff that is so soft that it won't sit in the barrel? It's really hard to core it. And even harder to analyze it. Anyway, that's what they've got. And I'll be getting into this. Oh, it should be the DRC. But it's a borehole mining candidate. It's a perfect candidate for, I'll be talking about this in a couple of minutes. Absolute perfect candidate for that. Now, I had the DRC there. Democratic Republic of Congo. Where the hell that name came from is anybody's guess. It's anything but democratic and it's anything but a republic. Anyway, in the DRC, there's a thing called Shinkalobwe. Has anybody even heard of Shinkalobwe? John? What's the significance of Shinkalobwe? I tell you, All the uranium for the Manhattan Project came out of this pit, all under smoke and mirrors and pretexts and things like that. And I think even El Dorado and Uranium City was part of this, that they were claiming their uranium was going to the Manhattan Project. They never produced enough. There wasn't enough came out of Ace Werner to make the numbers match. It came out of this pit in the ground here. That little pit there. And that little pit, it's, if you get into the date, there's a couple of books written on it. I should have brought them in, you can see it. But they basically, they think the uranium, which ended up with the Manhattan Project in the US, around about 80% uranium. That was what their ore grade was. 80, not 8, 80%. What is it? Pure pitch blende. And the stuff which was so-called tailings, which is what this stuff is, that runs 10% uranium. 10%, can you imagine? That's an unbelievable grade. And there's, if you go into Shinkolobwe on YouTube, you'll find a French video. It's all in French, you just got to learn to understand French to get this stuff, because the French control all this. This is all French stuff. But Shinkolobwe, it all goes back into the history of the Congo. Doug Hammarskjöld, he was assassinated on, I'm trying to come up with something for this, his plane was shot down. The president of the Congo was assassinated, and they went into a civil war, which they still basically have. And through LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn, you can communicate with the various people from the Congo who are trying to get it back into a proper mining jurisdiction so they can generate cash flow and things. They're denying uranium even exists, but they're not really denying it exists. But officially they had to say it doesn't exist. Unofficially it's called cobalt. So uranium is still coming out of the Congo, but it's called cobalt. And Orano, the French government, they have this pit. It didn't exist 2 years ago. Just go into Google Earth and, it hit that timescale thing at the top. You'll find it didn't exist 2 years ago. What the hell is that? It's right on strike with Shinkolobwe. It's another uranium. It's another Shinkolobwe. No question whatsoever. Now this stuff in here, what the hell is this stuff? That's the tailings. But I zoomed into it. I don't know if you can see back there, because I'm max resolution. There's little dots all over the place here. What are those dots? That's what the dots are. Poor local guy going into a hole in the ground. He's called an artisanal miner. And nobody has the faintest idea how much uranium, cobalt, you name it, is being produced by these guys scrubbing around here with, you've all seen the videos of child labor, that sort of thing. It's all sorted out by child labor. I've got videos of it being loaded into modern looking trucks, big semis. They put in burlap bags, they weigh about the maximum a local guy can carry. And they're pretty tough guys. I think these bags weigh over 100 pounds. And they can get them like this and put them in the back of a truck. Totally amazing. That truck, there's a whole new road being built from Shinkolobwe to Dar es Salaam, including a huge bridge for a river crossing. I think the French built all of this. So it gets trucked from Shinkolobwe to Dar es Salaam. It's all protected by military. You cannot get anywhere near those trucks. They get very irate, and you don't want to mess around with the African military, because you can end up in a very uncomfortable jail very quickly, which Jerry Ray ended up with. And we don't know, Nick Chiavetti, who used to come here as well, he went through an African jail, 6 months. It's not much fun, so you don't tend to mess with the Africans on that. But when it gets on the Dar es Salaam onto a ship, where does it go to? There's a port in Iran that it goes to, and it's unbelievable. These boats can be tracked by satellite tracking. And so this uranium goes to Iran. What's Iran got to do with it? Well, for one thing, you've got their own nuclear capability. But you've got various other countries around Iran who love this high-grade stuff. Pakistan, India, North Korea. who the hell knows? Some of it almost certainly went into Iraq, because Cameco now publicly states that they took 500 tons of yellow cake from the US military when they went into Iraq. So all this talk that Iraq didn't have nuclear stuff is just bullshit. They had really good stuff. And they don't know how much more uranium is sitting in the sand there. It was just drums of yellow cake. Libya had the same. So this is, and it probably all came from this sort of thing. I'm horrified by this. I just hate to see this. But I think we've got to admit, maybe 50% of the world's uranium and cobalt and all those rare earths you hear about for batteries, they're basically coming from this sort of thing. Now, Larry Hulbert, who's not here, but you all know Larry, don't you? Yes, good old Larry Hulbert. He's been around here for ages. I think my first field party in Saskatchewan had Larry as I think he might have been one of my assistants at one time. I know he was Tom Sybil's assistant. Anyway, Larry went up through the GSC and all that stuff. He's now in Calgary, sheltering from COVID. But he has teamed up with RTZ, Rio Tinto Zinc, on a thing called Janus Lake. Now, just to show you where Janus is, this is the Athabasca Basin. All the data for this, by the way, comes off the Saskatchewan government. It's all for free. Anybody can go into it. Anybody can access it. It's just a matter of putting it together to get a story. He spotted that there was very high-grade copper coming all the way through here. We're talking 2 or 3% copper. It wasn't as chalcopyrite. It was as bornite. It's covalite. It's a black copper mineral, very hard to identify. Is that covalite? I've forgotten the name. But I've seen this in samples. And most people look at it and say, funny looking black stuff. He thinks that there's a continuous mass of copper all through here. And it's all tree covered and lakes and this sort of stuff. But I think Larry's probably right. And it's exactly the same as the copper belt in the Congo and Zambia. The same sort of rocks, the same source just for geologists, because geologists love to know this stuff. I don't believe a word of the genesis of this uranium in Saskatchewan. It was in the rocks before the Athabasca sandstone came in. And it was just like the Congo. The minerals or the metals were concentrated by brines, very high temperature brines, because of when all that stuff was being metamorphosed, there were salt beds mixed up with the sediments, and high temperature brines are wonderful for moving metals like uranium, copper, nickel, cobalt. I think tin can get moved this way. And so they were sort of formed in these beds, which we don't know much about. And what happened in Saskatchewan, this stuff came to the surface, or what is now, well, used to be the surface before the sandstorm, and it kept moving because the known ore deposits in the Congo tend to form hills. That's how the prospect is found. They're mounds, and they're killed because of all these metals. There's not much grows on them, so the locals are always a bit superstitious of these mounds because of devils on them, and the rocks are really brightly coloured. And they say it's basically, think this stuff is still weathering, and because of tropical weathering, the rock expands and it actually moves up to form a hill about 10 to 20 meters high, which is almost exactly the same shape as we have for this uranium in Saskatchewan. But there it's covered with the sandstone. Or maybe it moved up before the sandstone was deposited. Who the hell knows? Anyway, it's the same system. No question about it. So now we've got copper, cobalt, and nickel in Saskatchewan. That's interesting, isn't it? Now, we've got some ladies here. Wouldn't you like to be that lady? See what she's standing beside? Copper. Oxidized copper. That's in the Congo. Recently discovered. You can see it's just beneath the surface. This is what the Congo's got. This sort of stuff. That boulder is $1 million boulder. No question. There she is. She's very happy, isn't she? I think it's too dangerous for people like us to go into it. but I'm not sure. I've got to think about this into the future for us. And my beloved wife over there who cringes whenever I mention this, because I found, it was in Google Earth search, that this stuff, an Austrian, I think it was a Belgian university, had a student who was doing their master's degree. And they figured he should go down there and take a look at these rocks for a master's degree. How to do it? Well, they also had in the university the son of the mines minister for the Congo, which is just like University of Calgary here. I don't know who the students are, but we've got all sorts of foreign students around. Now, because of that, they got a pass from the Congo government, the DRC, to allow them to go in to do essentially prospecting. And brilliant. They said, how do we go in? Because if you go into the UN type thing with army, don't last too long. They used, those little Chinese 125cc motorbikes you see all over Mexico? Use those. They became invisible. Nobody even looked at them. They just wandered through with a translator. They all speak French. So you're no good unless you speak French. But it's not Parisian or Quebecois. It's sort of Congo French. I can just about understand it, but it's... I think I could if I was there for a few weeks. Now, and time's getting up. I just want to tell you about this database, because that's what I'm here for. However did it develop? Because that's given all this stuff in Saskatchewan. And it's the same in Manitoba, in Alberta, Northwest Territories. US, I don't think it's been so good. Mexico has dipped its toe in the water and then said, no, we're going to sell it, we're not going to give it away. Namibia, it's amazing. Check out Namibian database. It's really amazing what you get for free. It all started with one of these machines. And it's sort of amusing how it happened. The governments, you know that, they never get rid of anything, right? When you file a document with the government, it becomes government property, and they hate to get rid of government property. So they had all these maps, which are sort of yanky, and they had them in cabinets. Remember those cabinets with the slide outs? Yeah, I was shown one once. It was about the year 2000. They just had a flooded basement. And Saskatchewan gets thunderstorms and basins fill up with water, so you can't leave your valuable documents in the basement. So they just moved to what they call the co-op building. And they were on the second floor. Now the second floor, you couldn't put the file cabinets in because it exceeded the weight limit to the floor. And a further problem they had was they moved these file cabinets a few times, and every time they moved them, they bent a bit. And I was shown a file cabinet with all this stuff in it, and nobody could open the drawers anymore. So to get to the maps, they had to destroy the file cabinet, basically just cut it apart. And then what would you have done with the maps? So this machine is showing up then. It's a scanner. It can scan. It's an even bigger one than this. I just showed you this as a big scanner. And there was a company called Line Images in Regina who bought one just to see if they could make money out of it. I think it was the most expensive thing at companies that do printing for a living, they don't like spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on scanners. But they bought one anyway. And it immediately went to, next question, they scanned them as a PDF because they figured that was the most normal sort of thing for people to have. DPI, the dreaded DPI. You all know what dots per inch is, right? If you scan at 70, you get not bad an image, but you don't get much resolution. At 100, you're beginning to get resolution, but the file gets bigger. At 300, you've got lots of resolution, but you end up with these files that are 100 megabytes, 200 megabytes. I had some done for me on some of my nautical charts. They said the scanning took 3 hours. It was a horrible time. And they charged me something like $200 a scan. That was back in the 1990s. God knows what it would be. Maybe they're cheaper. Anyway, the Saskatchewan government decided to put all its data through these scanners. And I was there looking at core and stuff while this was happening. And yeah, they did it. There's no question they took out a bit of the core lab on duty. And the scanning, they like to do it in a dark room, so you didn't get background light on the scanning. And they were there for weeks, months, just scanning all these documents. And it was a whole bunch of very personable young ladies who were doing the scanning. And I don't think I'm being critical of young ladies. By the time Friday afternoon arrived, they were mainly talking about the heavy date they were going to go on that night. And everybody who was watching it was thinking, holy moly, because this data was going through upside down, backwards. Oh, I'm glad my data wasn't a Friday afternoon scan. Anyway, it went into what they call an SMAD, Saskatchewan Minerals Assessment Database. And you can get a hold of this for free. It's a bit of an ugly database. This is a Saskatchewan database. And just suck it up and learn how to use it. Because what they have missing with all this data in the oil business, when all that data was digitized back in the 70s by, you remember a company called Digitech? It had a high rise over there. They had to come up with what they called a unique well identifier, a UWI, because every time they scanned the data, they had to give it this UWI, which then you could handle, you could put in the database. Still wasn't very good for Fortran formatting, but it was okay. So if you want to go and find the data, you went straight away to the file or the directory, which had this UWI on it, open that, and you'd find everything else. It was fairly easy with oil wells on the prairies because they used the LSD, the legal subdivision, townships and ranges. When you get out of townships and ranges, like in BC, northeast BC, that's all that long, and try to find wells there. Anyway, Saskatchewan government, they give you two ways to get it. If you actually know the file number, you can type it in here, and if you know the NTS reference, you can put it in there. Just forget about the rest, doesn't matter. Now, it actually works okay. Sometimes sits there thinking for a while, and don't even try getting on this database on Friday evening at home, because you'll find the whole street is clogging your high-speed internet for Google, for Netflix. You can see the access slows up. By noon on Friday, it's pretty good. By the middle of the afternoon, you're slowing up. By lunchtime or supper time, forget it. But you're pretty good at 3 in the morning. Anyway, that's how you have to get to this page. And I think I've told you enough, you all know how to use computers. And then this is how the data comes out. That's the equivalent of the UWI. And they're calling it 74P0007. That's in NTS 74P, which at least you've got some idea where it is. And that's the number to go on. I don't like to be critical of the Alberta government, but their data on exactly the same stuff is filed by the date it was submitted. Can you, and I have tried to figure out whatever it is, just the date that the stuff was submitted. There's no reference to area or what it is, the date it was submitted. I cannot believe it. And then you get a whole bunch of things here, maps and things like that. It's a bit of a mystery what it is, but you can click on it, and the data takes about a minute to show up at the bottom of your screen. It shows up on the bottom left corner. Click, up it comes, and you can save it from there. All free. Absolutely amazing. I think Saskatchewan government's done a fantastic job on this. A warning on data handling, not easy. You will get completely lost unless you organize yourself. And it was a good friend of mine in Saskatchewan called Dennis Day, who owns the trucking companies that moves the drill rigs around. Him and his dad drill wells for like a hobby. These guys could drill wells for hobbies. It's pretty neat if you do that. And he once came up to me and said, Bob, how do I use Geoscout, which is the equivalent of this for oil business? He says, I spend all Friday looking at the data and deciding on where I want to drill. I turn it off, I turn it back on Saturday, and I can't remember what I did on Friday. How do I flag something as interesting? And because there's so much data, when you're looking at 1 billion data items, how do you sort it out? And the other one, I have learned the hard way, is you have one of these things. It's sitting right there. An external hard drive. Why would you want an external hard drive? If you pour a cup of coffee over your computer, it kills everything. And this has actually happened to me 2 hours north of Red Earth. You know where Red Earth is, drilling a well. I fortunately have my spare computer and everything was hooked up to this thing, which is waterproof, and coffee-proof, and milk-proof, and beer. Beer is even worse, it's just sticky and goes into everything. So don't even bother with your PC's hard drive at this day. Always go it on an external hard drive. They don't cost much, $100. But get a good one, don't get a cheap one. Staples has $20 ones and $80 ones. The $80 ones you can drop, you can stand on, you can do anything to, they're military grade. The $20 ones tend to overheat, and that's the end of your data. And then you notice everything I've put in onto Google Earth. That's my base map. Because if you're doing anything like this, you have to have a base map. And I found that Google Earth, it just gets better. Every time you turn it on, the resolution improves, and they've got the contrast. And all that. It's absolutely unbelievable. I can't believe they can do it as a giveaway. I don't tend to download like the print from Google Earth. I find that a bit of an ugly system because you never get what you want, and the colours never are what you want when you print it out. So I tend to use the snip and stretch. You know that snip tool where you can just snip the screen? That's a much better way, and it comes out as a JPEG. Now, you can say, oh, well, Google Earth. I've checked Google Earth literally all over the world, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, from the west coast of North America to Europe. It is absolutely amazingly accurate. I have no idea how they got it to be that accurate, but my lower axle Garmin is good to about 1 meter XY. It's not so good on this end, but the XY is about 1 meter. And that's about what it is. I cannot believe they've got this precision. And every time I look in these databases, Google Earth seems to be the one that's taking over for everything. That KLM file. It's absolutely unbelievable. I think it's being used for legal surveys. It's being used for just about everything. But you have another problem. Projections. Projections. Oh, you will have the most wonderful time because most of this data is in the database. They haven't even heard of projections. There was some academic stuff that these people talk about. They use what they call flat field, just a rectangle, which is probably okay maybe at the bottom of the map. But if you've got a map which covers 10 kilometers, it doesn't match at the top. And, oh, what about that? I mean, it doesn't match. Oh. So you've got to handle that. That's a big headache. Normally hand editing is the only way you can get around that. Now, just again, when will this data type be extended worldwide? Because I think it's going to go worldwide. And all of you, especially you youngsters, much younger than me, wake up to the idea. This is where you'll be working. And Calgary is absolutely brilliant on doing worldwide stuff. Again, going back to the 70s, we had members coming in here who were developing those uranium mines in Niger, not Nigeria, Niger in the middle of the desert. They got so fed up with not being able to get groceries and stuff in Niger, they were actually chartering a plane at Calgary Airport, going to Costco or whoever it was, filling it with groceries, and that plane would land in the middle of the Sahara Desert on a packed earth airstrip, and that's how they got the groceries. You look at them, and I understand why they did it. But Calgary's always been very good at this, and they also, we don't see any really young people around, but those still in university and not sure what to do, I would say do your darndest to get in with 2 or 3 years with a survey, one of the surveys. That's how I got started. And nothing beats 2 or 3 years with a survey. And the GSC, that's the federal government. Well, the Alberta survey, they really got to sleep. The BC doesn't really have one. But I think the Nunavut survey out of Aquila, They're doing a whole bunch because I follow Nunavut's basically I've mapped diamonds. USGS, they've always been really good. And they tend to be foreign aid into Mexico, South America, things like that. The BGS, the British Geological Survey. How about them? They do all sorts of stuff. Again, it's mainly foreign aid type programs. But when we're in Ecuador, when I go on my beloved cruises, I always tend to download the geological map, so I know where I am. Downloaded Ecuador, it looked familiar. At the bottom, the British Geological Survey had done it as a foreign aid project for Ecuador. What? BGRM, who's heard of BRGM? Who's ever heard of them? They're the French equivalent of the British Geological Survey. North Africa, Indonesia. And again, if you want to present data and get lots of brownie points, take a look at BRGM maps. These ones. Oh, are they ever good? The colours are magnificent. Why? Impressionist paintings. They go to the Louvre and things like that, and they look at the paintings, they figure out the colours, and basically their colours on the maps are exactly the same as the French Impressionist painters used, where you can take a look at it at different distances, get different perspectives. They never have sharp boundaries, they have fuzzy boundaries. So one boundary goes here to another one there. It's really good stuff. IGME, nobody's ever heard of them. Spanish Geological Survey. Now they have just released a geological map of Spain. Big yawn. Who wants a geo? Spain's actually got a lot of mines. That's where Rio Tinto came from. And they mine uranium of all things. They've got uranium mines there, just the same as we have here. And they have produced, they're about 1 to 50,000 scale, but it's sort of hard to see on the screen. But the whole of Spain shows up as these geological maps that follow the terrain of Google Earth. So they're molded to the terrain. And to get on them, you don't have to pull this map and this map. You just got to Google Earth the site, and then you just scroll sideways. And all these geological maps show up, and you can print them off. It's absolutely amazing. I've never seen anything like it. Colours all coordinate. Locations are good. When I check their maps, they use Google Earth as their base map. So basically, you know where you are all the time. So if you see something, say, I'd like to go there, you can put a dot on the map. You can turn off the geological map, and you get Google Earth, which you can then flip to Google Maps, and you can see exactly how to get there. I mean, within a few meters. Go here, dig a hole here, whatever. GEOS, anybody heard of them? The Danish Geological Survey. My betting is they will take on Russia, because Russia is the big unknown. They've got Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, all those strange countries I can never figure out what they are. East side of the Baltic. And they're basically pushing their maps towards Russia. And they are really good maps. I mean, they have really high quality stuff. Only problem, it's in Dansk. The language is in Dansk. I can read Dansk, but it's not that hard. AccuMap. Have you heard of AccuMap? Who's heard of AccuMap? The standard base for oil business. When I came here 20 odd years ago to relocate in Calgary, I went along to see AccuMap because I was working for the Chinese and we had to have a system to work on. So I had a chat to the guy. He'd download AccuMap. And I said, well, that looks very good. Said, show me some place that you haven't prepared for. The guy said, oh, where do you want? Said, Colombia. Colombia. I said, well, where's an oil field? Ooh, he says, I think there's one here. So, we play around the oil field. And we found the wellheads, just like AccuMap. And they said, well, how do you know it's right? So I said, wait a minute, Bob. And he turned off AccuMap, and behind it was Google Earth, and they exactly corresponded. The wellheads on AccuMap were exactly the same as in Google Earth. And the AccuMap data had all of the stuff which UWI, lat long, production numbers, ownership, all that stuff came. So I said, well, that looks really good. Who do you sell that to? The guy laughed. Folks like me, he said, we don't sell many to corporations. Guys just like you in a few years' time. And where do they live? Maritimes. He says, people from Calgary who've retired to the Maritimes, and then they get under this database. And they said it was basically life insurance companies, investment banks, things like that. So they have this idea of where to invest, haven't a clue. So they send it to Jim or so in Nova Scotia, who brings up this Acumax. Big investment, $1 million a year for that. Have you heard of Petro Ninja? This is just appearing. And it is absolutely amazing. Because they've said Acumax all right, but it's $100,000 a year. We're going to make it free. So Petro Ninja has, as far as I've got Petro Ninja on here, it basically has all of Western Canada. I'm not sure if it has the Arctic Ocean, and I don't know if it would include the wells which I drilled in New Brunswick or Newfoundland, but it goes into the States, and I haven't really checked how far in the States it goes, but it's got North, South Dakota, Montana, a whole bunch of stuff, and every time I turn it on, it seems to have more and more of this data, and you get that data for free. If you want to pull up well logs, land ownership, things like that, you have to pay for it, and it's $350 a month for an access fee, which I think is pretty tough reasonable. And this stuff could compete with Acumax. I can see Acumax was probably really concerned about this as a competitor, because they may be pushed out of business, because if they keep losing clients, then they just can't keep going, and it's so expensive. I've gone this way. Google Earth, that's the basis. And you MEGers, get prepared for this. This is going to happen. And this is the rest of your lives, this sort of data. Just 2 final slides. What do you do with this data? That's the question. You've crunched all this stuff. Investors is a big yawn. They're not even interested. You have to show them a map like this. I call it a drill here map. A circle. Drill this well. Nice bold circle. That's all they really want. Not like this. They just assume you've done your due diligence on everything else. They may ask questions, but this is the one that's going to get attention, not all the other stuff. This is the map that gets attention. None of these wells here existed when I drilled this well for the Balkans about 10 years ago. And so far, the production out of that pool is about 2 million barrels of sweet light crude. And they're getting over $100 a barrel right now with the differential. So it's good target, nice stuff. The sister company, IROC, sold Whitecap 6 months or so ago. And they got this sort of price that sort of sits around in the order for $50, $60 a barrel in the ground, in that order. I was part of Whitecap, it's all very nice. And they did a very interesting acquisition, because you've got to think, how do you get money out of it? We had shares in IROC, IPO, and the payout was, you first of all got the shares, the money for your shares back. Now that's non-taxable because you've already spent it, so it's capital coming back to you. You then got the same amount of money, again, as cash, which is capital gains, and you just got to pay tax. Just tough, suck it up. You got plenty of money coming through. And then the kicker is then you've got almost as much again in Whitecap shares. And Whitecap shares are just an issue from the company. And I think a lot of the companies now are issuing shares like this. And you don't have to pay tax on it when you get them. If you're brave enough, you can sit on the shares and then, keep them forever if you want. Give them to your grandkids. You get the dividends off them. So that's fine. But that's one way to do it, is shares. Now, you've got this money, you've got this stuff in Saskatchewan. What are you going to do? You've staked it for 60 cents a hectare. But after 2 years, you've got to come up with $15 an acre of work on it. And the Saskatchewan government doesn't like people BSing them too much on the work. They want to show real, tangible work. But they are very acceptance of new technology. And you can bill that out at a pretty damn good price. I'd be $1,000 a day for me as a geologist. I could bill to them, and I could probably bill another 1,000 for new technology costing equipment. These things, drones. We had a talk just before Christmas by, how were they called? Well Done. Was anybody here for Well Done? Fascinating. They're just south of town here. They were showing a drone with different spectrum cameras, and they were showing how at different times of the year you could you use the foliage to check out the site. I think they had a copper deposit or something. It really worked. It looked as though it was real good stuff. Well, since then, the drones have got a bit bigger, and the government, I think, my son tells me, you can now fly a drone out of sight. You've got to be licensed and permitted, and they don't like you doing it over Calgary. But if you're up in North Saskatchewan, you can fly your drone to the limit of the wireless, which is, nobody quite knows what it is. It's Wi-Fi. 3, 4, 5 kilometers at least you can fly. And what's this thing down here at the bottom? A magnetometer. They've actually got magnetometers now that you can fly beneath a drone. And apparently it works just fine. So you can go in here and do very detailed mag surveys. And yeah, the drones don't cost anything to fly. It's your time and ability to not crash the thing. And I've seen another one in Finland that had another doohickey dangling a bit lower. It was an EM tool. The same sort of EM tool as you use underwater. You know, when they find mines and things like that, they've got these underwater EM tools. Same sort of thing, miniaturized for drones. And that was in Finnish, and it's very hard to communicate with people in Finland because they tend to speak Finnish, which I cannot speak. But anyway, this is all coming up. And what it means is, could I ground truth input without having to go to all that cut lines and things? So could I decide to get my piece of land, ground truth the input surveys, maybe get higher resolution than we've got already, and then mobilize the drill straight away to drill without all that other stuff? I think we're just about there. Boulders. Boulders. Any of you guys ever found a boulder? A good one. John has. I've got a boulder here. Sometimes they're not very big. $1 million boulder. I'm not joking. It's worth about $1 million. This was found on, there's me. My beloved took this photograph of me. Here. Patterson Lake, just down ice from Patterson Lake. I'm not telling you whose land I was on because I was trespassing or was I clearing up the mess. I really could debate that in court for years. The Saskatchewan government would probably side with me and say, no, you were just being a geologist who wanted to have a look around. And when I walked over here, down the road, I had my trusty scintillometer there with this going, boom, 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 typical background, and then suddenly went, boom. Not much, just went, zoom. I went back. Zoom. Went back again. Zoom. And you mark the location with your heel like this. You kick the ground and start digging with a geological hammer. That's all I had. I had to go down about that much. And you can see all the cobbles and stuff like that out. And I found that cobble, which is pure pitchblende. That is the Patterson Lake ore body, the stuff that ended up when the glaciers came through. Now, you say you found a boulder, but what else did I find? I'm on a road. That road is 45 years old. It was built by Roger Wallace. Anybody remember Roger Wallace? He lived in town for a while. Occidental Petroleum. That was their drill road. So he used that road, go down with a drill rig to drill for uranium on an input survey, which he'd flown a bit earlier. Just the same as we're doing now. But nobody had checked the road to see if it had any uranium boulders. Roger Wallace didn't have any boulders at that time. So he got about 4 wells out of management, and they go, well, there's nothing here. If we had that boulder, Occidental would now be the owner of the Patterson Lake deposit. That was built before Key Lake and Cigar Lake. So in all likelihood, you wouldn't have anything like the picture you have in Saskatchewan. The big mines would be right here. Just one little couple. I think I could have found dozens, because if you find one, you can always find another one, another one, and another one. And this is McArthur River was the same. I was talking to that about the boulders. That's a McArthur River discovery boulder. I was shown that on a joint venture partner. So look at it, big deal. That thing is 1% uranium. Bring my scintillometer to it, it goes off scale. Look at this surface. That's what it is. It's silicified. It's so darn hard. You had to use a sledgehammer to crack it open. So uranium, not only does it show up in the boulders, it also is associated with silicification. And the boulders go really, really hard. I mean, really hard. And I think there's hundreds more of these. I don't think we've even scratched the surface on this. So my conclusions for you guys, I think you can realize this. I think we're barely scratching the surface for uranium in Saskatchewan. Also cobalt, nickel, and copper. Well, there's so much up there, and it's such a big place, and it's so hard to get into, and it's all covered in trees and overburdened. This will go on for 100, 200 years. You're paid plenty good money to go up here. People say, oh, I don't want to go to Saskatchewan, there's bugs. Well, you get used to all that stuff. There's an enormous amount of data and government files, and they keep on updating it. Every time you go into files, there's another one appears, and another one, and another one. This is an endless sort of opportunity to go in and root around. Would I invest here? Don't know. I've staked claims. I'll sell the data. I don't know. I doubt if anybody here is willing to buy the data. But I'll be using LinkedIn to try to sell the data. And I do have some money in Saskatchewan now. These are my claims. Proudly bullet map up Saskatchewan government. All these claims from here to here. Robert Monday. Why ever did you stake them? Funny looking pattern. That's where I started with SNDC, Standard Energy, I think it's called, Next Gen stuff. They've been drilling here all summer. UEX has drilled here. You've got all sorts of things. Again, mainly Next Gen drilling in there. They follow the road. And many years ago, when I was starting to this, I was up in high level because there were no geology jobs in Calgary. So I was at Fairview College, and we had a delegation from Ray in the Northwest Territories, Fort Ray. They came down, and a buddy of mine used to work with them, so they spent the night with me in high level in our house. And it was fascinating. A bottle of whiskey got consumed, and they started to chat. They said, "You geologists are crazy. You're always chasing anomalies and things like this. Chase the road. Because how do you get in there? Up the road. The road's the most important thing of all. So stake the road. Because although nobody can really do anything, like if you want to go from here to here, they have to ask my permission to cross my claims, because I'm interfering with my right to prospect the piece of ground. They can walk around, but they sure as hell can't put a road across without me. And so I'd say, yeah, are you sure you can have that? It cost me $10,000. Well, I want $20,000 for your road access. They pay, no question. So stake the roads. And another thing with the road, talk about looking for boulders. What's the cheapest place to look for a boulder? Right down the road, right? You can drive in there. You can take a quad in there. You can take a side-by-side. Scintillometer, you can do it easily. You can be there all day. You can stop for lunch. Go in here, got to use a helicopter. Cost has gone sky high. Stick with road access. And just my final statement on road access. Do you guys remember Hassel? Hassel gave an MEG talk about 8-10 years ago. They had that uranium deposit just north of Denison Mines, Midwest Lake deposit. And they did exactly what I'm talking about. They astutely saw a little sort of irregular space in the staking, So they staked this, it was about a few thousand hectares. And they just staked the whole lot. Paper staking. It could cost them a few $1,000s. And then they found out they could get in by quad. You didn't need a helicopter. And so they had road access, quad, they had the claims. They'd only spent a few tens of thousands of dollars. And then I think they decided just to drill straight away off the input conductors. And they found the Rough Rider, uranium deposit. It took a bit more time. They sold it eventually to Cameco, and it was a lot of negotiation, $500 million. So they spent less than $100 million of investors' money, which isn't that hard to find if you've got boulders and your drillings coming up with good uranium grades. So they got 5 times the return on investment in about 3 years. And Carla, who was the geologist there, she worked with me on a well, she said the whole thing, I don't think they could have done it if they had to have a helicopter. They did it because they had quads. Because the helicopter would have eaten up so much of their budget. They never got anywhere. The quads, free. But don't let the boys drive the quads. Keep them off it. She never broke her quad. Anyway, that's what I'm telling you about databases and what you can do with them.
Any questions? I was 1:30, but well, you're probably going to be around over.
What's the time?
1:30.
No, I did. Oh, about an hour.
That's not
No.
Thank you. Again, on behalf of everyone, and you guys, Bob, thank you for coming and sharing with us your story. You haven't used your scintillometer yet, how come?
Sorry?
You haven't used your scintillometer?
I don't know, has anybody here never seen a scintillometer before?